Media fact-checker. Ilia Malinin's redemption at the 2024 Figure Skating World Championships after Olympic free skate collapse. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ilia Malinin won the 2024 Figure Skating World Championships in Prague's O2 Arena on Saturday, April 2024. Malinin led after the short program with a personal best score of 111.29 points, over 9 points ahead of the field. Malinin's free skate score was 218.11, finishing with a total of 329.40 points. Yumi Kageyama of Japan finished second with 306.67 points, Shun Soto third with 288.54 points. Malinin fell twice and dropped to 8th place in the Olympic free skate in Milan, March 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Malinin's lead over Kageyama and Xiao after the short program was 5 points, while Article 2 does not specify the exact lead but confirms Kageyama was second. Article 1 mentions Alexander Selevko scored a personal best 96.49 in the short program, placing third, but Article 2 does not mention this specific score or ranking for Selevko in the short program. Article 1 describes Malinin's Olympic free skate as disastrous with glaring mistakes, while Article 2 focuses on his redemption and absence of errors in the World Championships free skate without contrasting the Olympic performance directly. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont from South Australian Outback Station. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Gus Lamont was last seen on September 27, 2025, at Oak Park Station near Yunta, South Australia, around 5 p.m. playing on a mound of dirt. His disappearance was reported to police approximately 3 hours later by his grandmother, Josie Murray, on October 1, 2025. The 60,000-hectare Oak Park Station was searched extensively by police, volunteers, drones, and Aboriginal trackers, with no evidence found. In February 2026, police declared Gus's disappearance a major crime and ruled out theories that he wandered off or was abducted. Police identified a resident of Oak Park Station as a suspect in February 2026, though no arrests have been made. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states police ruled out Gus wandering off or being abducted in February 2026, while ABC reports police initially considered both theories before shifting focus. News Kamau mentions police returned to the property in March 2026 after rainfall, but ABC does not reference this specific timing for searches. ABC notes police prepared Gus's family for the worst early in the investigation, but News Kamau does not explicitly state this preparation timeline. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Northern Territory flooding and recovery from ex-tropical Cyclone Narelle impacts. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Katherine River peaked at 19.2 meters on March 7, marking Catherine's worst flooding in 28 years. Ex-tropical cyclone Narelle dumped heavy rain across the NT on March 10 to 11, triggering renewed flooding. The Katherine River was forecast to reach the major flood level of 17.5 meters on Wednesday afternoon, March 13, but did not exceed the earlier peak of 19.2 m. The BOM downgraded flood warnings for Katherine on Monday afternoon, March 11, after initial forecasts predicted moderate flooding, but later revised forecasts warned of major flooding. The Katherine Bridge water level reached 15.81 meters on Tuesday afternoon, March 12, and was expected to hit the minor flood level of 16 minutes later that day. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the Katherine River was just below the minor flood level at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, March 12, while Article 2 says it had surpassed the minor flood level of 16 meters by morning. Article 1 reports the river was expected to reach 17.5 m by Wednesday afternoon, March 13, but not exceed 19.2 m, while Article 2 does not specify a Wednesday peak time but confirms major flood potential. Article 3 claims the Adelaide River boil water alert was still active for multiple communities on March 11, but Article 4 states alerts for Batchelor, Numbulwar, Gilkmingan, and Adelaide River were lifted by March 14. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US government funding standoff over DHS, TSA pay delays and ICE funding disputes. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Senate approved a DHS funding package, excluding ICE and parts of CBP, by voice vote in a rare overnight session on March 29, 2025, funding TSA and US Coast Guard but not ICE or Border Patrol. TSA staff have worked without pay since mid-February 2025 due to a federal funding lapse, causing airport delays and staff shortages. Donald Trump ordered executive action on March 28, 2025, instructing DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin to immediately pay TSA agents, with paychecks expected as early as March 30, 2025. The House of Representatives rejected the Senate's bipartisan DHS funding deal on March 29, 2025, passing its own bill that fully funds DHS including ICE and Border Patrol for 8 weeks, 213 to 203 vote. TSA officer absences surged to their highest level since the shutdown began, with nearly 500 officers quitting or calling in sick by March 2025. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Trump's signature will appear on US currency in 2025, but this detail is not mentioned in Articles 2 or 3. Article 1 claims Trump's executive order to pay TSA agents came on March 28, 2025, while Article 2 states it was signed on March 29, 2025. Article 1 reports the Senate funding package was approved by a voice vote in a rare overnight session, while Article 3 does not specify the vote type but confirms passage. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arson attack on Jewish ambulances in London's Golders Green, antisemitic hate crime investigation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 4 ambulances belonging to Hatzola Northwest were set on fire in Golders Green, London, on Monday around 1:45 a.m. local time. The attack occurred near the Matchsyke Hadath Synagogue on Highfield Road, Golders Green. The blaze involved oxygen cylinders exploding, causing windows to break in adjacent apartment blocks. Police are investigating the incident as an anti-Semitic hate crime, with counter-terrorism officers leading the investigation. 2 men aged 45 and 47 were arrested on Wednesday, local time, on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 states the attack was anti-Semitic with a clear motive tied to Jewish identity, while Guardian Article 2 frames it as part of a broader global erosion of humanity without explicitly confirming anti-Semitic intent in the attack itself. Newscomau reports 3 suspects remain at large, but Guardian Articles 3, 4, and 5 only mention CCTV footage suggesting 3 people were involved, with no confirmation of additional arrests or active manhunts. Guardian Article 4 states the 2 arrested men were released on bail until April, but this detail is not mentioned in ABC or Guardian Articles 3 or 5. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 3 deaths in custody in Northern Territory within a week. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 19-year-old man died from a serious stab wound in Katherine on Sunday night, after being found in a vehicle by police at Holse Crescent, Katherine East around 6:45 p.m, and taken to Katherine's Temporary Field Hospital where he was pronounced dead shortly after, ABC Articles 1 and 5. The Katherine stabbing incident involved another 18-year-old man with stab wounds, airlifted to Darwin in a serious but stable condition, ABC Articles 1 and 5. A 19-year-old man was arrested in the same incident and remains in custody, ABC Articles 1 and 5. The Katherine incident is being treated as a death in custody due to the victim being in police care before death, ABC Articles 1 and 5. A 25-year-old man died in police custody in Darwin's northern suburbs on Tuesday after being placed in the rear cage of a police vehicle following an arrest at Tywee Gardens Retirement Village. He was pronounced dead at Royal Darwin Hospital at 10:10 p.m., ABC Articles 3 and 4, Guardian Article 2. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC Article 1 states the 19-year-old Catherine victim was pronounced dead soon after arrival at the field hospital, while ABC Article 5 does not specify the time of death beyond following an alleged stabbing. ABC Article 3 describes the 25-year-old man as being arrested without incident at Tywee Gardens Retirement Village, while ABC Article 4 does not mention the arrest as without incident. ABC Article 4 mentions the 25-year-old man was described as indigenous, but this detail is absent from ABC Article 3. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government cracks down on petrol price gouging amid Middle East war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Treasury Laws Amendment, doubling penalties for ACCC enforcement. Bill 2026 doubled maximum penalties for petrol price misconduct from $50 million to $100 million. The ACCC received over 500 reports of possible price gouging at petrol stations since the outbreak of the Middle East conflict. The ACCC is conducting a formal probe into allegations against Ampol, BP Australia, Mobil Oil Australia, and Viva Energy Australia. The new laws outlaw false representations including lying about price increases, price fixing, cartel behavior, and refusing to sell to independent retailers. ACCC Chair Gina Cass-Gottlieb confirmed the enforcement investigation publicly due to the issue's significance. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the bill is guaranteed to pass the House of Representatives but requires coalition or Greens support for the Senate, while Article 2 does not mention Senate passage uncertainty. Article 1 mentions the bill was introduced to Parliament and is pending Senate approval, while Article 2 states the bill has already passed both houses. This story was covered by news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. First NFL regular season game in Australia at MCG between Rams and 49ers. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The first NFL regular season game in Australia will be played between the San Francisco 49ers and Los Angeles Rams at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, MCG, on Friday, September 11, 2025. The kickoff time for the game is 10:35 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. General access tickets will be available on Ticketmaster starting April 8, 2025, at 10 a.m., with standing room tickets priced at $95 and general seating at $140. The NFL opened its Australian office in 2022 and established the NFLAC Academy on the Gold Coast. The game is expected to inject tens of millions of dollars into the Victorian economy and will include fan zones and live screenings. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the game is for the NFL opening round, while Article 2 clarifies it is a regular season game, not the opening round. Article 1 mentions ticket sales begin in the coming weeks without a specific date, while Article 2 specifies exact dates and times for ticket pre-sales and general sales. Article 1 does not mention the game's timing conflicting with AFL finals, while Articles 2 and 3 highlight this potential scheduling issue. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Qantas Jetstar cuts NZ flights due to fuel crisis amid global jet fuel price surge. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jetstar is cutting 12% of services on some flights between Auckland and Sydney, and Auckland and Brisbane, starting May. Jetstar reduced flights due to rising jet fuel prices caused by the Middle East conflict. Air New Zealand also reduced flights earlier this month, March 16 to May 3, citing 5% of total schedule cuts due to jet fuel volatility. Vietnam Airlines plans to cancel 20+ domestic flights weekly and suspend 7 domestic routes starting next month due to fuel shortages. Australia's fuel crisis affects 8% of service stations nationwide, with 560 stations lacking diesel or petrol as of reporting date. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Jetstar reduced flights due to rising jet fuel prices as a result of the conflict in the Middle East and other rising costs, while News Kamau emphasizes soaring prices and optimizing fleet without explicitly linking all cuts solely to fuel. News Kamau states 55 flights have been cut from Auckland, Sydney and Sydney Air Queenstown routes, but ABC does not mention Queenstown-specific cuts. News Kamau reports 8% of service stations nationwide lack fuel, 560 stations, while ABC does not provide a national percentage but lists state-specific outages. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Desi Freeman's 7-month manhunt and fatal police confrontation in rural Victoria. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Desi Freeman, born Desmond Philby, was shot dead by police at a property near Walwa, Victoria, on Monday, August 26, 2024, or 2025, depending on source, after a 7-month manhunt following the fatal shooting of 2 police officers in Porpunka on August 26, 2025. Freeman shot and killed Detective Leading Senior Constable Neil Thompson, 59, and Senior Constable Vadim de Wart-Hottet, 34, on August 26, 2025. During a search warrant execution at his Porpunka property related to historical sexual offences allegations. A third officer was seriously injured during the August 26 shootings and underwent surgery for lower body injuries, with police describing him as significantly damaged but expected to make a full recovery. Freeman was a self-proclaimed sovereign citizen with a history of anti-authority beliefs, including false legal theories and confrontations with police, such as attempting to arrest a magistrate and posting anti-police rhetoric on social media. The manhunt involved over 2,000 public tips, a $1 million reward, the largest in Victoria's history for an arrest, and coordinated searches involving Victoria Police, Australian Defence Force, Australian Federal Police, and officers from other states. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and The Guardian report Freeman was last seen fleeing into bushland near Mount Buffalo National Park after the August 2025 shootings, but The Guardian suggests Freeman may have shot himself with a police handgun minutes after the shootings, which ABC does not confirm. The Guardian implies police may have used the theory that Freeman was dead as a tactical ruse to encourage him to surrender, but Chief Commissioner Bush denies this was the case in multiple sources. ABC states Freeman was last seen in the Mount Buffalo area after the shootings, while SMH The Age report he was found near Walwa, approximately 200 kilometers northeast of Porpunka, with no clear consensus on his exact last known location before the final confrontation. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, SBS News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian teachers strike over pay dispute with state government. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Approximately 30,000 Victorian public school teachers, principals, and education support staff are participating in a strike on date due to a pay dispute with the state government. The Australian Education Union, AEU, is demanding a 35% pay rise over 4 years for its members, arguing Victorian teachers are paid significantly less than those in other states. The state government offered a 17% or 18.5% pay rise, 8% immediate plus 3% annual increments, after the union rejected it, with the AEU citing the offer as insufficient. About 500 state schools in Victoria are expected to close or face significant disruptions due to the strike, with many operating on skeleton staff. The strike is the first industrial action by Victorian public school teachers since 2013 or 2014, as confirmed by multiple sources. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and The Guardian report that some principals will only provide supervision for children of emergency workers during the strike, but Newscomow does not mention this detail. The Guardian states the government's offer was 18.5%, 8% immediate plus 3% annual, while ABC refers to it as a 17% offer rejected by teachers. ABC and The Guardian both cite 500 schools affected, but ABC emphasizes significant disruptions while The Guardian states classes have been halted, a stronger phrasing. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal government urges Fair Work Commission for above-inflation minimum wage hike amid cost of living pressures. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The federal government submitted to the Fair Work Commission requesting an economically sustainable real wage increase for minimum and award wage workers in 2026. 2.7 million Australians earn the national minimum wage or award wages, accounting for about a quarter of the workforce, 25%. The current minimum wage is $175.40 per week, higher than when the Albanese government took office in May 2022. The Fair Work Commission's 2025 minimum wage increase was 3.5%, but inflation has since risen to 3.7%, headline, or 3.3%, underlying, as of February 2026. The Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, raised the official cash rate to 4.1% on March 17, 2026, marking the second consecutive hike in 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the Fair Work Commission's 2025 determination declared this inflationary episode is now over, but Newscomow does not mention this specific phrasing or context. ABC states the government has not sought a specific number for the wage increase, while Newscomow implies the government's submission is more explicit about a real wage increase without specifying a figure, though both agree no number was recommended. ABC highlights that Treasury's inflation projections of up to 5% may be conservative, but Newscomow does not reference this specific Treasury warning or its potential impact on wage negotiations. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US allows Russian oil tanker to deliver fuel to Cuba amid US blockade. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Russian oil tanker Anatoly Kolodkin is carrying approximately 650,000 to 730,000 barrels of oil, 650,000 per Guardian, 730,000 per ABC, and is en route to Cuba's Matanzas port. The vessel is sanctioned by the US, EU, and UK due to the war in Ukraine. Cuba has faced a US oil blockade, leading to severe shortages of gasoline and electricity, with blackouts and rationing since at least 3 months, Guardian, or years, ABC. The oil shipment could supply Cuba's daily diesel demand for 9 to 10 days, producing about 180,000 barrels of diesel, ABC. US President Donald Trump stated he has no problem with the Russian tanker delivering oil to Cuba, emphasizing humanitarian relief over geopolitical implications. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the tanker carries 730,000 barrels of oil, while The Guardian specifies 650,000 barrels of Urals crude. ABC reports the tanker was just off the eastern tip of the island on Sunday, but The Guardian does not confirm this exact timing beyond tracking data. The Guardian mentions the US lifted sanctions on Russia to improve oil flow due to Israeli strikes on Iran, a detail not present in ABC. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arrest and charges in Sydney grandfather's mistaken identity kidnapping and murder case. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Declan James Donnelly, 23, was arrested on March 20 at his Seven Hills public housing address for his alleged role in the kidnapping and murder of Chris Bagsarian, 85, a Sydney grandfather. Donnelly was charged with Bagsarian's kidnapping and murder, as well as possessing an unauthorized firearm and ammunition, and drug supply offences, SMH, ABC, News Kamau. Bagsarian was abducted from his North Ryde home on February 13 and his body was found near a Pitt Town golf course on February 23, SMH, ABC, News Kamau. Donnelly was captured on CCTV at Bagsarian's North Ryde home at the time of the kidnapping and later near an abandoned Dural home where Bagsarian was allegedly tortured and killed, SMH. Gerard Andrews, 29, and Daniel Stevens, 24, were previously charged with Bagsarian's kidnapping and murder and remain in custody, SMH, ABC, News Kamau. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH states Donnelly was arrested on Wednesday morning, but News Kamau does not specify the exact time of arrest beyond early Wednesday morning. ABC mentions Donnelly's court appearance was briefly called up on Thursday, while SMH and News Kamau state he was charged on Wednesday afternoon and refused bail to appear on Thursday. SMH reports Donnelly was arrested wearing only his underwear and updated his Facebook profile picture on February 16, but ABC does not mention the underwear detail or the Facebook update. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Romanian nationals charged for stealing wallets from elderly Queensland shoppers via scam. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 3 Romanian nationals, 2 men aged 49 and 42, 1 woman aged 29, were arrested in 8 Mile Plains on the 28th of March, 2024 for allegedly stealing from elderly victims at Queensland shopping centres. The trio allegedly targeted elderly people, ages 70 to 94, at ATMs or grocery checkout points in Kenmore, Chermside, Strathpine, North Lakes, Buddina, Caloundra, and Laidley shopping centres. Victims were distracted by claims of dropped wallets, then had their cards stolen for fraudulent use. Police seized approximately $20,000 from a unit complex in 8 Mile Plains during the arrests. The 49-year-old man and 29-year-old woman were charged with multiple counts of fraud and stealing, 5 and 8 counts respectively, and refused bail. The 42-year-old man was charged with 1 count of stealing and bailed. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the 49-year-old man was charged with 2 counts of enter with intent, but News Kamau does not mention this charge. ABC specifies the 29-year-old woman was charged with 2 counts of enter with intent, which News Kamau omits. ABC mentions the trio's arrests occurred on Saturday, while News Kamau does not specify the day of the week for the arrests. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ABC staff strike over pay and conditions dispute. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. ABC staff went on a 24-hour strike starting at 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time on Wednesday, the first in 2 decades. The strike was triggered by a majority, 60%, of staff voting no to the ABC's latest 3-year Enterprise Bargaining Agreement, EBA, pay offer. The rejected pay offer included a 3.5% pay rise in the first year and 3.25% in the subsequent 2 years, plus a $1,000 one-off bonus for eligible staff. ABC Managing Director Hugh Marks apologized to audiences and staff for the strike, calling it very unfortunate and stating he was sorry. BBC content, reruns, and federal parliament statements replaced local ABC programming during the strike, with emergency broadcasts remaining on air. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the total pay rise over 3 years is 3.5% plus 3.25% plus 3.25% 10%, while Article 2 only mentions 3.5% plus 3.25% 6.75% without clarifying the third year's rate. Article 1 reports Marks saying the offer would amount to a pay rise above inflation for some workers, but Article 2 does not include this specific phrasing. Article 1 includes a direct quote from Marks on 702 ABC Sydney about staff in difficult positions. "I'm sorry to some of the staff that I know are in a really difficult position today," while Article 2 omits this quote entirely. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 2 men acquitted of raping intoxicated woman picked up while waiting for Uber in Darwin. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Panormitis Charalampis and Michael Vruvis were acquitted on all charges of sexual intercourse without consent after a 2-week trial in the Northern Territory Supreme Court on January 14, 2024. The men were charged with 4 counts each of sexual intercourse without consent after picking up the woman outside Mayberry nightclub in Darwin's CBD at approximately 3:30 a.m. The woman's blood alcohol concentration was estimated between 0.1 and 0.15, high to severe intoxication, when she arrived at her apartment block with the men. CCTV footage showed the woman lying on the ground and needing assistance to walk before being picked up by the men. The woman's memory of the night was described as fragmented and punctuated by black spots. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the woman's BAC was between 0.1 and 0.15, but Article 3 states it was between 0.2 and 0.1, likely a typo in Article 3, but inconsistent phrasing. Article 1 claims the woman's memory was completely wrong about being picked up and carried, while Article 2 does not explicitly refute her memory gaps but focuses on her fragmented recollections. Article 1 describes the woman's behavior as inconsistent with believing she was being raped, but Article 3 does not include this specific phrasing from the defense. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia warns Israel against occupying southern Lebanon amid escalating conflict with Hezbollah. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong warned Israel's Foreign Affairs Minister Gideon Saar that Australia opposes an occupation of southern Lebanon by Israel, emphasizing support for Lebanon's sovereignty. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz announced plans to create a security zone between the Israeli border, Blue Line, and the Litani River in southern Lebanon. Over 1,000 Lebanese civilians have been killed since Israel began striking Hezbollah targets, including more than 100 children and 40 medics, Lebanon's health ministry figures. More than 1 million Lebanese civilians have been displaced due to the conflict in Lebanon. Penny Wong condemned Iran's weaponization of the Strait of Hormuz, stating it impacts global oil and fuel prices. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscom Australia states over 100 Lebanese children have died, while ABC reports 120 Lebanese children have died. Newscom Australia mentions 1,000 Lebanese deaths including over 100 children, but ABC specifies 1,000 deaths including 120 children and 40 medics, no mention of 100 children in Newscom Australia. The Guardian reports Israel's bombardment has killed 1,000 people including 120 children and 40 medics, while Newscom Australia states 1,000 deaths including over 100 children, no mention of 40 medics. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Coroner's inquest into influencers' free birth death and birthkeepers' refusal to testify. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Stacey Warner-Key, 30, died from a postpartum hemorrhage and cardiac arrest after a free birth at home in Melbourne on September 29, 2025. Emily Lau, known as the authentic birthkeeper, was present during Stacey Warner-Key's free birth and when 000 was called at 4:13 a.m. Stacey Warner-Key's husband Nathan shared a heartbreaking Instagram post announcing her death on October 2025. A coroner's inquest into Warner-Key's death is proposed for mid-June 2026, ABC, mid-June, Newscom, June 15 to 19. Emily Lau has refused to provide a statement to the coroner's investigation, citing privilege against self-incrimination. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the inquest was adjourned until June without a specific date, while Newscom provides exact dates of June 15 to 19, 2026. ABC mentions the Health Complaints Commissioner's ban prevents any general health services, while Newscomau does not specify the scope of the ban. ABC does not mention the hospital name, Frankston Hospital, where Warneke died, which Newscomau explicitly states. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Dietary factors and the mind diet's role in preventing dementia and cognitive decline. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Mind Diet, Mediterranean diet intervention for neurodegenerative delay, emphasizes leafy greens, nuts, berries, olive oil, poultry, fish, and limits red meat, butter, cheese, fried foods, and sweets. A 2024 Lancet Commission report identified 14 modifiable risk factors for dementia that could prevent or delay 45% of cases, including high LDL cholesterol, 7% influence, and untreated vision loss, 2%. The Mind Diet is associated with a 15 to 22% reduction in dementia risk, with the strongest effect among Mediterranean-style diets according to pooled observational studies. People adhering most strongly to the Mind Diet retained up to 20% more grey matter over 12 years, corresponding to a 2.5-year delay in brain aging, observational study. The APOE4 gene variant, present in 25% of people, increases dementia risk and is linked to unprocessed meat consumption benefiting cognitive decline in carriers, though processed meats remain harmful. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH The Age claim the Mind Diet's grey matter benefits are objective due to brain scan studies, but ABC notes these are observational and cannot prove cause and effect. SMH The Age emphasize the Mind Diet's strong evidence for dementia prevention, while ABC cautions that trials testing the diet directly produced mixed results, no memory improvements in one 3-month study. SMH The Age state the Lancet Commission did not include diet as a 15th factor due to measurement complexity, but ABC does not address this omission directly. This story was covered by ABC News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Air Canada CEO's bilingual language failure after fatal airport crash in New York. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 2 pilots were killed in a collision between an Air Canada Express jet and a Port Authority fire truck at New York's LaGuardia Airport on Sunday night, local time, Sunday, 2024 date unspecified. The pilots killed were Antoine Forest, from French-speaking Quebec, and Mackenzie Gunther, a 2023 graduate of Seneca College's aviation program. Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau released an English-only condolence video on Thursday, using only 2 French words, bonjour and merci, in a 4-minute message. Rousseau acknowledged in a statement he does not speak French fluently, saying his limited French has diverted attention from the profound grief of the families. The NTSB revealed the runway alert system, ASDEX, did not trigger before the crash because the fire truck lacked a transponder. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau reports the NTSB chair Jennifer Homendy explicitly stated we rarely, if ever, investigate a major accident where it was one failure, while Guardian does not quote this exact phrasing or emphasize it. Newscomau includes a direct quote from NTSB's Doug Brazee about analyzing cockpit recordings showing the co-pilot transferring control to the captain 6 seconds before the end, which Guardian does not mention. Guardian states the video included French subtitles and all information was communicated in both languages on Air Canada's website, but Newscomau does not explicitly mention subtitles in the video. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Lachlan Kennedy defeats Gout in 200m at Moree plant meet for 2nd straight year. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Lachlan Kennedy won the 200-metre at the Moree plant meet in Melbourne on 20.38s, beating Gout who finished in 20.43s. The race took place at Albert Park's Lakeside track with around 9,000 to 10,000 spectators in attendance. Kennedy also won the 100-meter earlier in the evening with a time of 10.03s, setting a meet record. Gout is 18 years old and finished school before becoming a full-time athlete. Cam Myers set a new Australian record in the 1500m with a time of 3:30.42s. But not all outlets told the same story. Thege and ABC report Kennedy's 100m time as 10.03s, but Guardian does not mention this specific time for Kennedy's 100m win. Guardian, Article 1, states Gout is only blew out 18 candles in December after leaving school, while Guardian, Article 3, does not specify the exact month of his birthday. ABC reports the headwind as -0.7, but this detail is not mentioned in Thege or Guardian articles. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Meta ordered to pay $375 million in New Mexico child exploitation case. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A New Mexico jury ordered Meta to pay $375 million in civil penalties for violating New Mexico's consumer protection laws under the Unfair Practices Act. The lawsuit was brought by New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres's office in December 2023, following a 2-year Guardian investigation, April 2023, revealing Meta platforms enabled child sex trafficking. The jury found Meta liable for misleading consumers about the safety of its platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, and enabling child sexual exploitation. Meta's encryption of Facebook Messenger in 2023 blocked law enforcement access to evidence of child exploitation crimes, as revealed in court testimony. The trial lasted nearly 7 weeks, with the jury deliberating for about 1 day before reaching the verdict. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reported the jury awarded $375 million in civil penalties, while ABC stated the same penalty was equivalent to $538 million in total damages, implying a different calculation. The Guardian mentioned the state sought court-mandated changes to Meta's platform starting the 4th of May, but ABC did not specify this exact timeline for the next phase of proceedings. The Guardian explicitly stated the lawsuit focused on Meta's platform design and non-speech issues, while ABC did not emphasize this distinction in its reporting. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Trump installs Columbus statue on White House grounds amid controversy over historical legacy. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 13-foot-tall, 1-ton statue of Christopher Columbus was installed on October 13, 2025, on the grounds of the Eisenhower Executive Office Building near the White House. The statue is a replica of a monument that protesters dumped into Baltimore's Inner Harbor on July 4, 2020, during anti-racism protests following George Floyd's murder. The original Baltimore statue was rebuilt in 2022 using shattered pieces retrieved from the harbor. The pedestal of the new statue includes the inscription, "Destroyed July 4, 2020. Resurrected 2022. Rededicated by President Donald J. Trump, October 13, 2025 foot." The statue was loaned to the federal government by the Conference of Presidents of major Italian-American organizations. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 frames the statue installation as a deliberate act to silence counternarratives and assert power, while Article 2 presents it primarily as a symbolic gesture of historical revisionism without explicit political weaponization claims. Article 1 emphasizes the statue's role in terrorizing and rewriting history to excuse power, while Article 2 focuses more on the statue's controversial legacy and Italian-American pride without this framing. Article 1 argues the statue's placement is a declaration of narrative intent that renders debate irrelevant, whereas Article 2 does not explicitly state this intent but describes it as a latest attempt to position Columbus as a hero. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. TGA proposes sunscreen regulation reforms after SPF testing controversies in Australia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Therapeutic Goods Administration, TGA, proposed reforms to Australian sunscreen regulations following choice testing that found 16 out of 20 popular SPF 50 plus sunscreens failed to meet advertised SPF claims, News Kamau, ABC Twice. Choice tested 20 SPF 50 plus sunscreens in 2023, with 16 delivering lower SPF than labeled, including Banana Boat Baby Zinc, SPF 28 instead of 50 plus, Kohl's SPF 50 plus, SPF 43, and Ultraviolet's SPF 50 plus, SPF 4, News Kamau, ABC Twice. The TGA cited Australia's highest global skin cancer melanoma rates, 2,000 deaths annually, as justification for regulatory changes, News Kamau, ABC Twice. TGA proposed simplifying SPF labels to low, medium, high, or very high categories to address consumer confusion about SPF scale nonlinearity, News Kamau, ABC Twice. TGA plans to strengthen oversight of SPF testing laboratories, adopt new testing technologies faster, and require public disclosure of SPF testing data, News Kamau, ABC Twice. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states Ultraviolet's SPF 50 plus tested at SPF 4, while ABC does not specify Ultraviolet's exact result but lists 7 sunscreens with lower than claimed SPF, no ultraviolet mention. News Kamau quotes TGA's report directly about current understanding of SPF values, but ABC does not reference this exact phrasing in its summary of TGA's concerns. ABC implies TGA's reforms are entirely new, while News Kamau states the proposals were proposed by the TGA following a shocking scandal, suggesting a reactive rather than proactive stance. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-Iran conflict escalation, Trump's diplomatic tensions with Australia, and global economic fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump extended Iran's deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz until April 6, 2026, pausing strikes on Iranian energy plants for 10 days, ABC, Thij, SMH. Iran's initial response to the US peace proposal was described as one-sided and unfair by a senior Iranian official, ABC. Australia provided advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles to the UAE at its request, Thij, SMH. Trump criticized Australia and the UK for not providing sufficient support in the Strait of Hormuz, calling UK aircraft carriers toys and Australia not great, Thij, SMH. Anthony Albanese stated Australia was not consulted before the US military action in Iran and denied any unmet requests, ABC, Thij, SMH. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Trump suggested Iran allow 10 oil tankers to transit the strait as a goodwill gesture, but Thij SMH do not mention this specific proposal. Thij states Trump called the UK's aircraft carriers toys compared to what we have, while ABC does not include this exact phrasing. ABC reports Trump said he was not aware of any further request having been made of Australia, but Thij SMH imply Australia has agreed to all US requests. This story was covered by ABC News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. F1 crash safety concerns and Kimi Antonelli's record-breaking performance at Japanese GP. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Oliver Bearman crashed at the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix after evading Franco Colapinto, suffering a 50G impact and limping away with bruising only. The crash occurred at Suzuka Circuit, specifically near Turn 13, Spoon Curve, with Bearman's Haas hitting the barrier at 190 miles per hour after Colapinto moved off the racing line. Bearman's closing speed with Colapinto was approximately 50 km per hour, 31 miles per hour due to differing power unit energy deployment. Kimi Antonelli won the Japanese Grand Prix, becoming the youngest driver to lead the F1 Drivers' Championship after his second consecutive victory as a teenager. Antonelli dropped from pole position, 6th at start, to 6th place before recovering to win, with Oscar Piastri finishing 2nd and Charles Leclerc 3rd. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions Behrman's impact was measured at 50 G, while Guardian does not specify the exact G-force but confirms a 50 km/h closing speed. ABC states Behrman's Haas suffered extensive damage after the crash, while Guardian does not mention the extent of car damage. ABC notes Mercedes has not led at the first corner in any race this season, but Guardian does not address this specific detail. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Iranian Australians and global Iranians celebrate Nowruz amid war and government suppression. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nowruz began on March 21, 2024, marking the spring equinox in the Northern Hemisphere. Nowruz is a 2,000 to 3,000-year-old festival observed in Iran, Afghanistan, Albania, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, and diaspora communities worldwide. The Haft scene is a traditional Nowruz spread featuring 7 symbolic items starting with the letter S in Farsi, representing renewal. Iranian authorities restrict or discourage pre-Islamic traditions like Nowruz, with surveillance and threats of arrest reported. Nasreen Kaur, an Iranian Australian, moved to Aidlong, NSW, population less than 1,000, in 2019 and faces challenges celebrating Nowruz without family in Iran due to internet blackouts. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Nasreen Kaur is in Aidlong, NSW, while Article 2 does not mention her location or name. Article 1 describes Nowruz as a non-religious holiday without religious ties, while Article 2 explicitly ties it to Zoroastrianism, pre-Islamic, and frames it as a defiant cultural practice against the Islamic regime. Article 1 mentions internet shutdowns in Iran during Nowruz, but Article 2 does not specify this as a primary barrier for diaspora communities. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian politician Andrew Hastie criticises US-Iran war strategy and economic fallout impacts on Australia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Andrew Hastie, Liberal MP, criticised US President Donald Trump's huge miscalculation in the Iran war as of early March 2024. Iran has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, impacting global fuel supply chains and Australian fuel exports. Andrew Hastie stated Australia is dependent on the export of fuel in and out of the Middle East due to its location. The Australian government announced it would underwrite additional fuel cargo deliveries to address supply shortages, March 2024. Andrew Hastie served as a Special Forces veteran and fought in the Middle East alongside US forces. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Hastie may be open to a gas export levy despite coalition opposition, while Newscomau does not mention this proposal. ABC states Employment Minister Amanda Rishworth explicitly said work-from-home measures are not being considered for fuel shortages, but Newscomau omits this detail. ABC notes Hastie described Trump's criticism of Australia's warship refusal as petulant, February 2024, while Newscomau does not reference this. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's waste sector faces diesel shortages threatening service disruptions and public health risks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Waste Contractors and Recyclers Association of NSW Chief Brett Lemon wrote a letter to the Federal Energy Minister about diesel shortages threatening garbage collection services. Queensland Waste Recycling Industry Association CEO Alison Price stated some members have received less than half their regular diesel allocations. WA Waste Management and Recycling Association Chief Mike Bobrowicz reported West Australian operators expect only about half their regular diesel allocations. A NSW waste operator was informed they would receive only 12,000 L of their regular fortnightly 50,000 L diesel delivery. The federal government temporarily lowered the safe temperature threshold for diesel to allow imports from Canada, Europe, and the US. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau attributes the diesel supply constraint to the war in Iran, while ABC does not mention this specific cause. Newscomau states councils will need to slug homeowners to cover shortfalls, while ABC does not use this exact phrasing and focuses more on rate bill increases. Newscomau emphasizes that the sector is potentially catastrophic and will lead to significant health and environmental issues as a direct quote, while ABC frames it as a warning but does not quote this exact phrasing. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Gold Coast Mayor Tom Tate's Mar-a-Lago visit and Trump Tower development ethics controversy. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Gold Coast Mayor Tom Tate received gifts from the Trump Organization during a February 2024 visit to Mar-a-Lago, including meals, accommodation, and airport transfers valued over $500. The Trump Organization's gifts to CR Tate were declared in his latest register of interests, required for gifts over $500 or multiple gifts totaling $500. Tate's Mar-a-Lago visit occurred between February 12 and February 14, days before a $1.5 billion deal was signed between Altus Property Group CEO David Young and Eric Trump for a Trump-branded tower in Surfers Paradise. The proposed Trump Tower in Surfers Paradise would be a 91-story development featuring a 6-star resort hotel, 270 luxury apartments, a retail plaza, and a beach club, claimed to be the tallest building in Australia. Tate's overseas trip included stops in Italy, the UAE, and the USA, where he also attended the Day USA trade event in Los Angeles. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the Trump Organization paid for Tate's flights, while Article 2 notes the exact cost was yet to be revealed and ratepayers paid for his flights. Article 1 mentions Tate met with US President Donald Trump and Eric Trump, while Article 2 does not explicitly confirm Trump's presence in the meeting beyond Eric Trump. Article 1 states the Trump Tower would be the tallest building in Australia, while Article 2 does not include this claim. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia and EU sign long-awaited free trade and security partnership after 8 years of negotiations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement was signed on Tuesday after 8 years of negotiations, with leaders Anthony Albanese and Ursula von der Leyen finalising terms at Parliament House in Canberra. The deal is expected to create an annual economic benefit of $10 billion for Australia, lowering trade barriers between Australia and a market of 450 million EU consumers. The agreement includes a 30,000-tonne annual tariff-free quota for Australian beef exports to the EU, a 500% increase from current levels. The EU dropped demands for Australia to scrap its luxury car tax entirely, instead reaching a compromise on the tax. The Australia-EU Security and Defence Partnership was also finalised, focusing on defence industry cooperation, cybersecurity, and counter-terrorism. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC states the EU's beef quota is well short of the 50,000 tonnes demanded by the NFF, while Newswire simply reports the quota as 30,000 tonnes without framing it as insufficient. The ABC mentions the EU's beef quota was influenced by political concerns from member nations due to the Mercosur deal, but Newswire does not reference this context. The ABC reports that some geographic indicators, e.g., Prosecco, Parmesan, would still need to be phased out on exports overseas, while Newswire does not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nicolas Maduro's federal court appearance in New York for narco-terrorism charges and legal funding disputes. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nicolas Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores are scheduled to appear in a Manhattan federal court on Thursday, the 14th of March, 2019, for a narco-terrorism case following their capture by U.S. Special Forces on the 3rd of January, 2021 in Caracas, Venezuela. Maduro and Flores pleaded not guilty during their 5th of January arraignment in New York. The U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, initially granted Maduro a waiver on the 9th of January, 2021 to allow Venezuela's government to fund his legal fees, but reversed the decision within 3 hours, per Maduro's lawyers. Maduro and Flores are accused of spearheading a corrupt government that protected and promoted illegal activity, including drug trafficking, per U.S. charging papers. Maduro and Flores are detained in a Brooklyn detention center and have not requested bail. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports that OFAC's reversal of the waiver was announced by Maduro's lawyers within 3 hours of the initial grant, while ABC does not specify the timeline of OFAC's reversal. The Guardian states that OFAC's initial waiver was reversed due to an administrative error, but ABC does not mention this explanation. The Guardian describes Maduro as wearing a neon t-shirt under prison garb, while ABC does not mention the color of his shirt. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government underwrites fuel imports amid Middle East tensions and shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced new fuel security powers on Saturday to underwrite purchase of additional shiploads of fuel, petrol diesel, to address shortages during Middle East tensions. The government will amend the Export Finance and Insurance Corporation Act to grant new fuel security powers, with legislation introduced to Parliament on Monday. Shortages have been reported at hundreds of service stations, particularly in New South Wales and Queensland, with panic buying cited as a key factor. The government will use public funds to underwrite the financial risk of importing extra fuel, giving suppliers confidence to secure additional and discretionary cargoes. Independent fuel distributors, servicing regional Australia, have struggled to obtain supply from major importers, leading to dry service stations. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC emphasizes the government's focus on supply stability and dismisses supply constraints, while The Guardian frames the shortages as a direct consequence of Middle East conflict disruptions. ABC reports the opposition's demand for a 53% fuel excise cut, but The Guardian does not mention this specific opposition policy detail. ABC states the government has repeatedly insisted shortages are caused by panic buying, while The Guardian does not explicitly endorse or refute this claim. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NSW government considering banning strata manager commissions to cut apartment costs. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. NSW Productivity Commissioner Peter Achterstraat's report recommends banning commissions for strata managers, citing conflicts of interest and inflated costs. The report estimates scrapping commissions could save apartment owners $333 million over 15 years in NSW. More than 1 million people live in strata properties across NSW, with nearly half of Greater Sydney's homes expected to be strata titled by 2041. Strata managers currently receive commissions, e.g., 20% on insurance policies, from services like insurance, energy, and telecommunications, often split with brokers. A NSW Productivity and Equality Commission report received over 550 submissions, with strong support for reform from apartment owners. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Achterstraat wants commissions banned sooner rather than later, while the SMH notes the government is only carefully considering the recommendations without immediate action. The ABC implies the opposition has not yet taken a definitive stance on banning commissions, whereas The Guardian explicitly mentions opposition spokesperson Tim James would consider a ban. The SMH reports some strata managers insist commissions are necessary for important and resource-intensive work, while The Guardian frames commissions as purely conflict-driven and unnecessary. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Bill Cosby Civil Sexual Assault Trial Verdict and Damages Award. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A California civil jury found Bill Cosby liable for drugging and sexually assaulting Donna Motzinger in 1972. Donna Motzinger was awarded $19.25 million in damages, $17.5 million past damages, $1.75 million future damages, for mental suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, grief, anxiety, humiliation, and emotional distress. The jury deliberated for just over 1 day before ruling in favor of Motzinger. Bill Cosby did not testify during the trial. Cosby's attorney Jennifer Bonjean stated they would appeal the verdict. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the jury deliberated just over 1 day, while The Guardian says 3 days of deliberations. ABC reports the punitive damages phase starts later this week, while The Guardian says it was set to determine awards later on Monday. The Guardian describes the trial as a 5-decade-long effort, while ABC does not emphasize this framing. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's fuel crisis from Middle East conflict impacts daily life and economy. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Petrol prices in Australia reached an average of $2.38 per litre for regular unleaded in the week ending March 20th, up 27% since the war began on February 28th, according to the Australian Institute of Petroleum, AIP. Diesel prices in nearly every Australian capital city surpassed $3 per litre, with a 38 to 40% increase since the US-Israeli strikes on Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, reducing global oil trade by 20%, ABC and Guardian. Consumer confidence in Australia dropped to 63.1 points in March, the lowest since records began in the 1970s, per ANZ Roy Morgan, amid soaring energy prices and cost of living concerns, ABC. The Strait of Hormuz closure, caused by the US-Israeli war on Iran, disrupted 20% of global oil trade, leading to global oil price surges, ABC and Guardian. Hundreds of Australian service stations have run out of fuel due to supply disruptions, ABC and Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Dennis Maddock's business faces uncertainty due to no information coming from the federal government about price or surety of supply, while The Guardian's tour operator criticizes the government for consistently failing to call out the USA and Israel for their warmongering without mentioning direct government inaction on fuel supply. The Guardian's petrol station worker mentions running out of 95-octane fuel, but ABC does not mention octane-specific shortages beyond general diesel petrol scarcity. ABC cites a 38 to 40% increase in fuel prices since the war began, while The Guardian's taxi driver estimates a $80 weekly increase, from $120 to $200 fill-up, implying a higher percentage rise for some users. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-Iran conflict escalation and economic fallout from Strait of Hormuz blockade. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump's military strike on Iran failed to achieve a quick victory and instead led to prolonged conflict. Iran has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, threatening global oil supply chains. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has raised concerns about stagflation or recessionary pressures globally. UK 10-year gilt yields spiked to over 5% as markets reacted to the Strait of Hormuz closure. The world economy was previously experiencing decent growth, falling inflation, and prospects for lower interest rates before the conflict escalated. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two articles as they are identical in content. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NSW introduces laws to crush illegal high-speed e-bikes amid safety concerns and gambling reform delays. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. NSW government will introduce legislation to seize and crush e-bikes operating over 25 km per hour, with roadside dyno units for speed testing. Transport Minister John Graham stated if it behaves like a motorbike, it's probably illegal and could end up in the crusher. A two-day safety blitz in NSW issued 170 fines for illegal e-bikes. Independent MP Kate Cheney plans to introduce a private member's bill for a gambling ad ban, marking 1,000 days since Peter Murphy's report. The e-Safety Commissioner warned AI companion chatbots lack safeguards for children, including age assurance and self-harm support. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports NSW will introduce a minimum age for e-bike riders between 12 and 16, but Newscom Australia does not mention this detail. The Guardian states 40 e-bikes swarmed Sydney Harbour Bridge, while Newscom Australia does not specify the number of bikes involved in the incident. The Guardian mentions Victorian teachers and Tasmanian teachers striking over pay disputes, but Newscom Australia does not cover this story. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US court rulings hold Meta and Google liable for social media addiction and harm to minors. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A Los Angeles jury found Meta and YouTube liable for negligence in a social media addiction trial on June 12, 2024, awarding $3 million, $4.3 million AUD, in compensatory damages to plaintiff KGM, 20-year-old woman. Meta was assigned 70% of the liability, $2.1 million, and YouTube 30%, $900,000, with punitive damages to be determined in a separate phase. The plaintiff testified she became addicted to YouTube at age 6 and Instagram at age 9, leading to depression, self-harm, and body dysmorphia by age 10, with a therapist diagnosing her with social phobia and body dysmorphic disorder at 13. The jury found both companies knew or should have known their platforms posed dangers to minors and failed to adequately warn users, with jurors also finding malice, oppression, or fraud in the case. The trial lasted 6 weeks and included testimony from top executives, whistleblowers, and expert witnesses, with internal Meta documents revealing knowledge of addictive design features targeting children. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Van Badham, states that the Los Angeles verdict found platforms were deliberately designed to be addictive for children, while YouTube spokesperson in ABC and News Corp Australia denies this, calling YouTube a responsibly built streaming platform, not a social media site. Meta's spokesperson in News Corp Australia claims teen mental health is profoundly complex and cannot be linked to a single app, but The Guardian, Friedland, cites internal Meta documents showing executives prioritizing engagement over harm reduction, including one stating the most important thing is increasing time spent on the platform. The Guardian, Friedland, reports that Meta's internal documents revealed executives knew their platforms were harmful to children and designed features to maximize engagement, while Meta's spokesperson in News Corp Australia states they remain confident in our record of protecting teens online. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.